Hello, everyone. Welcome all. We're delighted to have you here for this exclusive masterclass, Visualizing with AI Insight versus Illusion on the LSE Data Analytics Career Accelerator, hosted by Andy Cotgreave. Before I hand you over to Andy, a quick note. We've opened this session not only to current students, but also to those exploring the program. If you'd like to learn more, you'll find a link to the program brochure in the chat, as well as an option to book a call with one of our enrollment advisors. If you have any questions for the speaker during the session, please use the Q&A function. And use the chat for any other remarks. I know Andy will be asking you to use the chat during his session. With that being said, please join me in welcoming our masterclass, Andy.
Well, it's good afternoon, isn't it? It's noon here in the UK. Hi, everybody. Great to have you all here. Let me know where you're dialing in from. I'm dialing in from near Oxford. If you know the village of Brill, then that's where I am at. So let me share my screen and then we can get started. And no, I've lost the chat window. Right, hang on, bear with me. I'll get chat open. There you go. I've got chat open. Right. So as I said, please use the chat throughout this session to interact. I can see the chat window, so I can see what you're all saying. So use that to interact. But if you have questions you want to ask me at the end of the session, then please use the Q&A for those. Okay, so I'm going to get going. We're going to talk today about the whole way in which AI is influencing data visualization and data storytelling in particular. So with that, I'm going to get started with a quote quiz, a little bit of trivia for you. So I'm going to read out a quote, and I want you to type the year you think this quote is from. Okay? So here's the quote. Millions of dollars are spent yearly on the collection of data with the expectation that the data will automatically cause the correction of the conditions studied. Right? So here's a quote. Somebody wrote this quote. They're frustrated about the fact that we're collecting all this data. Now we're processing it with AI in 2025. But we think having the data solves the problem. So what year do you think that quote is from? So feel free to type in the chat a year. Now we got Lois, well done, is coming in with 1990. I've got 1940, 1942, 1926, 1800. Ebru, good guess, Ebru. You've gone a little bit too far. So I'm seeing a skew towards 1960 and beyond, and a few people are going back in time, thinking surely it can't be back in time. So Alex, you say just 10 years ago. Well, Alex, the answer was 1914. 110 years ago. 110 years ago. This is from a book called Graphic Methods for Presenting Facts. Yes, I love the emojis. By Willard Coate Brinton. He was a frustrated statistician and engineer in New York. And he's like, why are we spending millions of dollars on data but not actually solving the problems? And in the book, he wrote about he hated pie charts. They should be banished to the scrap heap. With a tabulating machine, you could process 3,000 records per hour. So this was big data back then. And, and he came up with really innovative and interesting ways to present data and persuade people how to do better with data. So is this a problem for somebody like me thinking, well, let's make life better with data? Because the same problems we have today are the ones he was facing 100 years ago. And yes, Silas, I like the First World War times. Wow, indeed. So how does that make me feel about 2025 and the situation we're in today? Well, what I've come to realize is that throughout history, as humans, we've just grown more and more data, right? We've collected more and more data, probably exponential rather than linear. And on top of that, we've built technology platforms, things that can process more and more data, right? And whether we start in the time of Brinton or we could go back even further, as we look forward to today, we've got business intelligence tools and generative AI helping us do data analysis. It's like, well, that frontier has always existed, but the frontier gets bigger and bigger. So we can do way more with data than we could in Brinton's day. But it also means because we can do more, we have more ideas. And I think we will perpetually be frustrated with technology and data because we have more ideas. So I think it's part of humanity that we're going to keep developing tools. And in the current day, we'll be like, oh, AI analytics can be so frustrating. And it's like, yeah, well, the technology's developed, but now I want it to do more than it actually can. So ideas outstrip data plus technology. So my name is Andy. Really great to meet you. In fact, I've been at Tableau for 15 years. I just left last week. And in fact, I've realized I have not yet updated my slides because I've now left Tableau to focus on teaching, presenting, and writing books. So I've got a new book coming out next week, Dashboards That Deliver. It's all about the process of building dashboards. And if you want to sign up to my newsletter, there's a QR code here, and I'll share a link later in the session. But it's been my mission, my ambition to help people see and understand data. And we're going to look at that today with a little focus on the world of generative AI. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see in the last 2 years, I've been really digging into whether these LLMs can actually do data analysis to the standard that me, somebody who's been doing data analysis for 20 years, is content with. I won't spoil the answer just yet. This is what we're going to cover. The bulk of this is going to be in the middle of the bit, so the grounding, the apps landscape, and can AI do it for us? But I will first ask you all to type an optimist or pessimist question. I just want to gauge where this audience is. So just type, are you an AI optimist or pessimist in the realm of data analytics? Wow, optimists, I love it. And a few pessimists, right? Okay, that's really interesting. Right, so we're feeling happy, right? You're a happy crowd. You're very recently optimistic after being brainwashed. Mariam's recently optimist after being brainwashed by my supervisors. Brilliant. Optimist with reservations. Right, I realize I'm asking you to make a binary decision on a question that isn't really binary. All right, so write down one reason that explains why you have sat on one side of the fence. I'll give you 10 seconds to write that. Maybe 15. Why are you an optimist pessimist? So IHAB says it's all about the questions you ask. Yeah, prompt engineering is clearly a skill we need to learn. Potential efficiency gains, love it. Anna says imagination is the limit. Work is made easier and faster. Opportunities. But Atis says concern about taking jobs. Right. Oh, here's a good one. Employers don't know how to implement it. You know, that's actually not something I've got in this talk, but I think that's a really interesting question. We are all happily using Gen AI just to get on with our jobs, and all our CEOs and CDOs and bosses are like, but how do we implement this stuff at scale? And that's really struggling to do that. So there's a real disconnect between how people are using Gen AI. Optimistic because of the fast growth of AI, but Rachel is wary of the pace before appropriate guardrails are in place. Yeah. Do private corporations operate faster than governments can legislate? I think that's a really big question. All right, so I'm sensing optimism is outweighing pessimism. I'm not here to judge either way. But I'm really glad to get your perspectives. So before I get into the AI apps and AI for the data visualization and storytelling, just give a really quick grounding in data storytelling and how we can use data. If you've seen me speak before, you might have seen this, but here is a chart from 2012. It's an award-winning visualization showing deaths, conflict-related deaths in Iraq from 2003 to 2012, and it was done by Simon Scar and appeared in the South China Morning Post. But really, before you looked at the data, what the genius of Scar, what he did was make you see a smear of blood dripping down the screen as if there was a gash across the page. And then the title at the top forces you to look at this blood and have this visceral response that emphasizes the cost of human life in this period of Iraq. Brilliant idea by Scar just to recognize that the shape of the data looks like this. And so if you turned it upside down and colored it red, it would have that emotive, bloody red response to us. But the power of storytelling is in making those decisions. So I took the chart, and well, most bar charts point upwards. This is what it would look like if you just built it in Excel. And most of them start with a blue-gray corporate default color. And at this point, now the emotion is taken out of it. You can actually see that at the end of this time period, the deaths were at the lowest they had ever been in this time period. So this chart, turned upside down with the color change, tells a completely different story. Deaths are on the decline. Positive times in Iraq, things are still a struggle in Iraq, but they are better. And this is the human power of data storytelling. Simon Scar recognized that he could use color, orientation, and title to tell an evocative story of death, but you could also use the same chart. It's the same chart to tell a positive story, right? So as humans, we know that data viz is not neutral. Every chart we make is a choice, and every choice is an opinion. This is really important. It's really important because it's even when you're trying to do dry, boring charts for dashboards, there's no such thing as a boring chart for dashboard. But when you're trying to take the emotion out, it's still really hard. So here's a super simple data set. Let's call it sales of apples and bananas. What's the right chart for this data? We could obviously ask an AI to do this. Or as a human, we have to take a step back and go, well, even with a simple data set like this, I can't tell you which chart it is until you tell me which question you want to answer. Right? So these are seven different versions of visualizing the data, and they all require different charts. You probably want to see sales through the year. It's like, well, that's okay, but did you want to see it total? So here's A and B combined, or did you want to see it broken down? Even at this super simple basic starting point, this chart hides the total sales, and this chart hides the breakdown of A and B. You have to make that choice every time you are answering a question about data, thinking about what your users want, right? And that thing about what do your users want is something you know as a human being, but we'll see if AI does too. We can even tell completely different truths from this data, right? I can choose an average, the mean, to show that B did better than A overall, or I can choose the median to show that A did better than B overall in the year. Both of these are legitimate aggregations that tell opposite stories about this data set. So as a human being, I also know that there's no such thing as single source of truth, because the data is the truths within a data set are down to the ones that I choose to explore and aggregate and display as a human being. So I have this question, right? I tear myself apart with this question genuinely, because I think this AI gives us one of the biggest challenges, certainly in my career. It'd be like, well, where do I sit in this? This is the cycle of visual analysis that Tableau made famous. It's like, I think data analysis will remain a fundamentally human operation. AI tools at best are going to augment us, but I am not yet seeing a panacea of happy, easy AI use, Gen AI uses in the field of data analytics. And we can talk about text-based, coding-based tasks, but that's outside the scope of this. All right. Now, so as we go to the next step, I think, well, that's a grounding in storytelling. How is this appearing inside the data applications landscape? And what I'm seeing is sort of a matrix of the way that AI is applied within the data analysis tools that we use. So first of all, you just get features like buttons in a user interface that have AI of some sort running behind them when you press them. Here are two examples from Tableau. In Tableau, when you connect to an Excel file, you can just if the Excel file, if the table is all over the place and it's not a very well formatted table, the data interpreter runs a whole bunch of machine learning algorithms and actually will turn a messy table into a meaningful table for analysis. You also have a feature called Explain Data, which again looks and profiles your data to find interesting insights. And that's a way to get to insights quickly. But both of those are just, you press a button, something happens in the background that happens to be AI based, and you get some outputs. Then you've got the revolution provided by ChatGPT, or sort of kick-started by ChatGPT in public consciousness around the conversational way of working with data. You can upload CSVs to Claude and ChatGPT and say, analyze my data, and off you go. Beyond that, we've got co-pilots. So this is something we see in Tableau, in Google Sheets, in Microsoft. You've got, well, here's the existing application, and you've got an AI co-pilot, wingman, assistant that is sitting on the right-hand side, trying to help you get to complete your tasks, hopefully more quickly and more efficiently. And finally, agents. If you're paying any attention to the AI tech landscape, everybody wants agents, right? Gartner, really big analytics firm, or a big firm that looks at industry, lots of industries. They predict that by 2028, 15% of day-to-day work decisions will be made autonomously, from 0% last year. I've been watching Gartner events for about 14 years, and I find all their predictions wildly over-optimistic. I would love to go and do a meta-analysis to see how many of them actually came true. Give me a thumb up or thumb down, or a smile or sad face if you agree or disagree with this. Do you think 15% of decisions will be autonomous by 2028? I'm seeing thumbs up. You are an optimistic crowd. All right. Well, let's hope we come out true. I'm not quite sure what the laughing with tears ones means. So, and Toby's gone thumbs down. Right. That's funny. So everybody who did emojis was optimistic, but the people in comments are pessimistic. What does that tell us about how we interact with webinars? I don't know. So down the side, we've got those 4 ways I see AI being applied. And across the top, we've got the different ways generative AI is emerging inside data analytics platforms. So we've obviously got the LLMs, right? They try to give you all those features, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. And then if you look at the data applications industry, there are thousands and thousands of startups who are trying to build small shell applications around an LLM in order to just focus on something niche within the field of data analysis. And then, well, I'll explain in a minute, and then hopefully explode from there. And then you've got established platforms. So you've got Google Sheets. That should be a Google Sheets icon. Microsoft, Tableau. Every BI company is sticking AI into their platform somewhere. So this is kind of the matrix I see in the landscape. And as you all, work out where are you going with which tools are you going to choose? What skills do you want to focus on? I think you've got to, well, until you really specialize, you've got to have this awareness that this is the landscape I see. And each one of these has advantages and disadvantages. So the LLMs, I mean, we're all using them. Everybody's using ChatGPT and Claude. Google defaults us to using AI these days, right? So we're familiar with this. They're really flexible. They feel like really good personal assistants. However, they're really, if you're a CDO or a CEO, they're really, really hard to scale or productionize, right? It's a non-deterministic, hallucinatory, random answer generator that always feels like it's doing the right thing, but isn't necessarily, right? So they're great, but do they work in data analysis? Maybe they don't successfully. The startups, I think, are really interesting because they're really agile. Small companies, rapid development. They can respond to changes in the LLM underlying technology, and so they're in a real position to innovate very, very quickly. But if you're a customer of a vendor, I think a lot of startups are going to crash and burn as some of them find the right solutions. And then I'll see there's a question. I'll come on to that question in a minute in the chat. And then the established platforms like Power BI, like Tableau, well, these guys have a real challenge because they've got legacy code bases that are 10, 15, 20 years old, and they're trying to stick AI on top of those things. And so in that case, they're using a really super powerful infinite answer LLM and then funneling that down into the narrow legacy scoped features that already exist. Right now, there's a lot of success there, but I think the vendors are fundamentally shackled by their own legacy code base. Right. So it's a really interesting time to be in this technology. And then even within this, the tech's already changing massively. If you're looking at MCPs, Model Context Protocol, so this is basically where you can take your tool, your platform, say Tableau or Google Sheets, and then or Looker and ThoughtSpot, and then you can connect through the chat interface of Claude. You can just connect to your data and then interact with your data through Claude. I mean, I think that the revolution there is massive, right? It could completely destroy user interfaces. There is a huge amount of safety concerns about MCPs, but I think as we work our way to solutions, I think these are going to be the biggest impact on certainly on user interfaces. I might be wrong, but this is where I see the most excitement. I've also been reading a lot more about small language models. You may have been following the news. The LLMs, the progression in LLMs, that they aren't infinitely scaling, but we're seeing some really good success with small language models. So that as that emerges into the field of data analysis, we might see some change there. Yeah, I had that question. The problem about which to choose and the right prompts, it's probably a little out of scope in this particular talk, but we can address that one in Q&A if we want. All right, so there you go. We looked at the landscape. I want to share my experiences of using AI to do the job I do as a data analyst. Can it do it for us? Yes, no. And I've really enjoyed working in this industry for nearly 20 years, and I think it's always because there's tensions between success and challenges, and I'm seeing exactly those in my attempts to use AI for data analysis. So I've done a whole bunch of exploration, particularly with Claude and ChatGPT, a little bit with MCPs, but I've not published that yet. And I'm going to answer this. I'm going to ask 3 questions and then conclude with, can AI do the data storytelling that I can do after gaining the experience? All right. So can AI find data stories? Well, I am going to say, so can AI do exploratory data analysis? And I'm just going to hit you with warnings, 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 and warnings. We've looked at this data set, right? It's simple. It's got 24 numbers in it, right? You can't go wrong with a 24-digit data set, can you? Well, I've plugged this data into ChatGPT, and this was 6 months ago it did this, right? ChatGPT sells itself as a powerful data analyst tool now. And I said, show me sales of apples and bananas. And it drew this chart. Right now, this chart looks great. As human beings, we are suckers for things that look trustworthy. It's got a nice color palette. It's got curvy lines. You know, we're attracted to curves. And it just looks great. It's got a legend, blah, blah, blah. Look, fantastic. I'm a diligent data analyst, and I happen to fabricate the data set anyway. But it did take me 4 or 5 prompts to realize that actually when I draw that chart in Tableau, the data for A and B goes up because I fabricated the data set. And I was like, well, this data isn't going up. Like, ChatGPT, what did you do? What did you do? And it took me 4 more prompts to realize that it had taken my date data and given it a numerical access, but it had ordered the dates by alphabetical order. So this is not time. This is just April to September in alphabetical order. So this is a heinous error, right? I'm a diligent data analyst who happens to know this data intimately. So I could spot that and then get ChatGPT to correct it. But not everybody well, even me, but will I always spend the right amount of time to be diligent enough to look at the output and validate it? Because there will be, real data analysis is with big data sets, with multiple columns, thousands of rows of data that the analyst doesn't know. You are exploring it to find things out. And, I could have pasted this and sent it to my boss and said, well, we peaked early in the year and we peaked late in the year, and that would be absolutely wrong. As a data analyst, it takes years for us to build trust with our stakeholders, our business users who ask us for insights. And that trust can be broken in seconds. So I just don't trust it. I don't trust the LLMs themselves to not make mistakes. And I'm a data professional. So a lot of people who aren't as skilled as me or as experienced as me will be doing data analysis with these tools. And they might be making heinously incorrect conclusions. So I think that's really scary, right? And I'm not sure what the solution is, but we have to be extremely diligent. And I think, Joseph, you said there is always human due diligence when using these tools, right? And I think it's right. I would call you have to be diligent when you're using these tools. Your managers, if you're working as a data analyst, will be saying you have to be diligent, right? But guess what? It's not always easy to be diligent. I mean, if this was a massive data set, I mean, do I do all my analysis and then redo all my analysis step by step to validate everything? As humans, we're also under pressure to work quickly, possibly without as much resources and support and people we need. So I think it's absolutely right. We should be duly diligent, but it's very hard to maintain that at a level that actually can catch hallucinations. Hallucinations are fine in text-based stuff, but they can be hidden in analytics. Can AI get smarter with time? Asks Deepak. I don't know. It's going to get better with things, but let me come on to can AI tell data stories? I think we'll talk about that in a minute. The challenge. Oh, well, no, sorry. Actually, the challenge here is when AI could get more smart and show, maybe not make the mistakes. Maybe we can eradicate the mistakes, but it doesn't know what questions my end users want to ask, right? So there's that challenge. I think we've got a big way to go. Right. Okay. Can AI tell data stories? I've done some exercises using the Iraq data to explore, in this case with Claude, to what extent can it editorialize just based on data? So can you make a chart from this data? It can make a chart. That's fine. This is Claude. This is from 6 months ago as well. But then I said, okay, make a chart that focuses on the human tragedy of life. So what I'm trying to do here is, I don't want to tell it how to tell the story. I want to let Claude make its own decisions on how the story should be told, with particularly focusing on the emotive side. So that simple prompt led to this, and then a couple of prompts later, again, I was saying really push that. We ended up here, and I think this chart is really fascinating. Right, we've got really evocative, powerful titles. Lives are lost, families are torn apart, communities diminished. The tooltips talked about lives silenced, right? And these are decisions Claude was making. I then egged it on a little bit and said, can you actually make this chart? And it did. So we got to this chart, and Claude is making really strong editorial decisions here. And then I said, okay, now change the chart, but make it a positive story. So that's the exercise I did. But that single prompt went from that to this. And all the annotations have changed. All the language has changed. And I think this is really fascinating because it shows that I can engage the Gen AIs to editorialize and opinionize. But also, to what extent is it doing that even when we're not asking it to, right? Again, as human beings, we're quite fallible. There's a lot of research showing that the conclusions the meaning of the title of a chart is the most strongest indicator of what people will conclude from the chart. And that's true even if the title of the chart describes something that the chart doesn't even show. So there was research where they said, they were like, here's a chart, it shows sales are going up, and the charts showed that sales are going down. People left that chart with the memory that the title was what was true, sales are going up. So is AI making these editorial decisions for us? Well, we sort of have to do a bit more research around that. So I do think it's really good part of a creative process using AI to help guide you, come up with ideas. I think there's some pretty powerful stuff you can do with Claude. I did ask it to come up with really interesting ideas, and one it came up with was using a candle metaphor for each month loss of life. So each candle, the length is the amount of people that died through conflict. I don't think this is a very successful chart, but I think it's a really creative idea. Yeah, well, let's talk about best practice in prompts. I see those questions. Let's talk about those in the Q&A section. All right. What about data applications and dashboards? You know, I've got a new book coming out, and I'm finding some really useful use cases for building dashboard ideas. Really important, I say ideas here. So here's a page spread from the new book, and just like we did in Big Book of Dashboards, there's 15 scenarios which are real world dashboards, and we describe the process of how those dashboards were built. This chapter is about how I use Strava to track my distance, my cumulative distance each year. My goal is to walk 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers recorded in Strava each year. Now you'll notice the dashboard doesn't show my running total, it shows my progress against the goal. So the higher up the line is, the further I am ahead of a daily average of 4K, or about 2.3 miles. And you can see there are a few times in the year, in the last year up to June last year, where I was not walking as regularly as I should be, so I was behind schedule. So this dashboard helps me because I don't care about how many miles I've walked. I need to know how many miles each day I need to walk in order to be able to hit the goal, right? So that's the dashboard. Use it every day. And within each chapter, we open each chapter with this big paragraph. This paragraph describes the scenario that the chapter is about, right? So there's 15 scenarios. There's 15 of these. Now, if you're building dashboards, many of you will end up building dashboards or data applications that people can monitor. How do you come up with the idea for mocking these up? What's the right way to lay this out? What's the right charts to use? One thing I've found is pretty interesting is take that big paragraph, right? So here what I've done is take the paragraph, the big picture, and pasted it into Claude to see what it builds. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to show you the results. So let's go to Claude Desktop. So here's Claude Desktop. I'm going to say, help me build a mock-up. No, let's just say, build me a mock-up for a dashboard that fills this scenario. Right. So this paragraph is the paragraph from the big book dashboards that deliver, sorry, describing what I want from a dashboard. And I'm going to ask Claude to build me a dashboard mock-up with that scenario. So I'll click OK. I'm going to come back to that. Right. We'll come back to that in a minute. So when I did this, when I was preparing this talk for the first time a few months ago, this is the mock-up it drew. And it's absolutely genius because it came up with the idea of charting how far ahead or behind the target you were. You've got a nice bullet chart, green and red according to things on schedule. This is really cool. So I think Claude has this potential to make really good mock-ups. I did another one. I then asked it about what if you did it with more people, if it was an athletics club and you wanted to see everyone's goals. And then it came up with this mock-up, which is kind of crappy. So it's a bit hit and miss, but at least it is creating ideas for you. So let's go to Claude. All right, and here we go. So now I'm going back to Claude because what I find is because it's non-deterministic, it changes its output every time. So what has it done? Okay, so I've got a progress tracker. I've got miles completed, expected. Oh dear, it's made up some data. Apparently, I'm 400 miles behind goal. Clearly, it has a pessimistic opinion of how well I'm going to walk this year. And then required pace, and then a list of recent walks and some quick insights. So that's very different to the one I got a few months ago when I tried it. There's not really anything in the way of charts or visuals. It's obviously using colors and icons. And it's all right. I mean, it's all right, isn't it? Is it all right? I don't know. It's all right. It's not. It's slightly disappointing given that a few months ago it came up with something like this, right? So I think again, Claude can do some really cool stuff. Sometimes it makes mistakes, and it always does things differently. So it's that it's unpredictable, and that's the nature of things. But I have found it is pretty useful. And yeah, Rabab, you said it's a good starting point, and I think that's right, right? Trying to take any of these and actually implement what they solve, it's really hard. They're really scrappily put together from a data dashboard point of view, but they are good for idea generation. So I'll I'll share it with some conclusions and then a general thing. Can AI do data storytelling? I have one really big frustration as a data analyst who I love getting my hands dirty with data, playing with it and getting in a sense of flow and feeling like I'm touching and feeling and using the data and then expressing it the best way. With the LLMs, I find one of the most frustrating things you get is the LLM would say, in answer to your question, the answer is this. And then you look at it and go, no, that was wrong. You made a mistake. And then I think you all probably know what the response is from here. Claude or ChatGPT says, oh, you're absolutely right. I should have done this. And it's like, if you're so intelligent, why did you get it wrong in the first place? And I think the challenge there is because it's it's very good at probabilistic answer making, but it's hopeless at actually knowing what the intent is in my prompt. And one answer there is instead of writing a 50-word prompt, write a 600-word or a 1,000-word or a 1,500-word prompt. But then you get to the point you could have just done the work yourself. One of the other challenges I find with using generative AI is what Ethan Mollick calls the jagged frontier. And if you're not reading Ethan Mollick's newsletter, you should be. He's a brilliant person looking at Gen AI and business. So the jagged frontier, which I feel really acutely in AI and analytics, is about this. So imagine a castle. This represents, and inside the castle is everything you know how to do, all your skills, right? Outside the castle walls is stuff you don't know how to do, right? Now, as a human being, I know I can write some custom SQL. I know I can't really write some Python, and I know I don't know how to set up a DBT platform, but I know how to use Tableau intimately. So I know my frontier. It's very obvious. So this is easy. This is hard. But what about things that are easy for AI? Well, we've all had two emotions using AI, right? There are things that we think are really hard. Generate an image of an avocado that looks like an armchair. It's like, wow, and it does it. That's amazing. How could an AI do that? And then you ask an AI something really simple, like how many R's are there in the word strawberry? And it can't do it. And you're like, well, how stupid are you? Right? So there's things that are really amazingly easy for AIs and things that it just isn't capable of doing. And the jagged frontier is the fact that you don't know where this boundary is. So you end up with a real sense of frustration as you stumble your way through and things you think should be easy aren't. And as a data analyst, I find that really frustrating because I like to be in control, flowing with the data, having that real sense of my own agency and autonomy. And it's very disruptive when a tool gets it wrong. So I this as we get to my conclusions, this is my feeling of AI. I get a sense of AI vertigo in that AI is absolutely amazing. It's incredible. Then I get a sense of slightly existential dread because I'm like, what does it mean? I'll come on to that in a minute. And then I'm like, is any of it actually working? And then I go round and round and round. And I find myself less in the AI vertigo field right now. Even trying to get ChatGPT to turn that into a professional graphic. This is the kind of thing you can see on LinkedIn. Look, I scribbled a doodle and ChatGPT turned it into a graphic. Well, this took me 45 minutes and about 32 prompts because it made so many mistakes. And every time I asked it to fix one mistake, it broke another thing. So this was really frustrating. So I prefer that. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about ethics because I think it's a really important thing to address. And I think as we embrace AI or not, we should be aware of some of the things that AI is doing. So I do think it is absolutely incumbent on us to be using AI. I think, the employment world is changing. Obviously, we have to do it. But AI is going to have massive impacts on jobs. From one respect, the way the AI models get trained is pretty exploitative, particularly people from less developed countries. So there's quite a lot of controversy there. I was looking today, here in the UK today, Google are announcing a £5 billion investment, and Ruth Porat, in an interview on the BBC just this morning, said it'd be naive to assume there's not a downside to employment, and she's just like saying, "Hey, companies, you go work it out, right?" And she says 60% of the jobs today didn't exist 80 years ago. And that's fine, right? If society's changed, but is AI changing things faster than society can control? That's something we should think about. You need to think about critical thinking, right? It's brilliant asking tools to do things for us, but at what cost, right? In the US, there's loads of stories about lawyers making stuff up and getting caught out in their legal briefings. There's papers actually showing that people using Gen AI a lot are reducing their own cognitive skills. They're seeding human knowledge off. If any of you got teenage kids, I do. It's pretty scary seeing them just use Gen AI to do their homework and not really thinking about what they're doing at all. I find that quite scary. And those things apply in data analysis too. The environment, this AI stuff doesn't come cheap, right? It might all live in the cloud, which is a cutesy word for, well, it sounds cutesy, but it's actually just massive data centers that consume huge amounts of energy, that power infrastructure struggles to cope with. And then who controls AI, right? Unelected private company CEOs are the ones making decisions which are impacting all of our societies. So, that's a slightly pessimistic bit of reality. The train is leaving the station, right? We have to be on board this train. I recommend you all just take a step back, think about some of the ethics. If you want to know more about ethics, Empire of AI by Karen Howe is brilliant. Really, really good book, all about Sam Altman and OpenAI. Whew! So there we go. We got to 12:45. That is my data visualization in the age of AI. In conclusion, I have a real internal tension about the technology as a data analyst. I do things using Gen AI which help me analyze data and blow my mind. Sometimes it is so garbage in its results, I just wish I hadn't wasted my time and should have started manually. I think the changes down the road are going to keep on revolutionizing things. I think MCP and SAT, small language models, could further revolutionize where we're going. And then over all of that, there are ethical challenges which we need to be aware of. And somebody said in the comments earlier, it's like, can regulation keep up with the challenges? In the UK, we're trying to regulate. In the US, they're trying to basically deregulate and let AI run free. There's competition with, you know, different ideologies in China versus America. So AI is not a free technology, right? You know, it comes with a price. Well, there you go. I hope that's been interesting. That is my that's my setup, and I've left 15 minutes for questions. So Q&A time. If you've got questions, put them in Q&A. If you've got other general comments, just put them in chat. For the time being, thank you very, very much. I hope that was enlightening. And I think Luke is going to help me with Q&A. Is that right?
Yes, I will do, Andy.
Yes.
Thank you. We've got no questions in there at the moment. So yeah, attendees, please do. I'm sure you've probably got lots of questions to ask Andy, so please do pop them into the Q&A now. And yeah, I'll keep an eye on that and we'll get all the questions asked.
All right.
Thank you. Cool. I can see a couple coming through now, which is great. I'm sure people just needed a bit of time to pop those through. Cool. So I'll come to the first one from Toby, which is, I'm currently using Copilot, DeepSeek, and Gemini. Why did you settle on Claude? Is it particularly useful for data analytics tasks compared with others?
Yeah, great question. I've not used DeepSeek partly because of tool fatigue. By the time DeepSeek came around, I'd already been using Claude GPT or ChatGPT and Gemini quite a lot, and I was like, oh, another tool. Things like Copilot in Microsoft and agents on the or Copilot on the side of Tableau. I do use Microsoft Copilot and even the Copilot in Google Sheets. It's actually really good at writing formulas. I find everything else a little frustrating. In terms of which of the main frontier models I use, I find ChatGPT is really bad at coding applications and mocking up ideas. I mean, that might change, but Claude's coding and the way Claude codes and works the way I do as a data analyst and application developer sits the best with me. I've not used Google Gemini very much to try and just do data analysis, so I can't comment so much on that. But yeah, it was a case of finding what worked for me and then running out of energy to keep going with all the new ones that came out.
Thank you, Andy. Another question come through from Paris. What are the top 3 recommendations for spotting dodgy data visualizations as someone viewing data presented to you?
That is a great question. I think that, right, the first, if it's a bar chart, have they truncated the y-axis, right? If a bar chart doesn't start at 0, they are lying with data. There are very few rules in data visualization, but I think a bar chart must always start at 0. So if it doesn't, they have broken a rule. Everything else is a guideline, right? So I think top 3, right, so that's number 1. And then after that, really it's about looking at the data, but then just considering at what point they might have brought in emotion into the visualization. Now it's totally legit. You know, both of these are fine, right? They're great visualizations, but this kind of thing can seep into business presentations, into government publications, and they might just be trying to lead you down one path. And it's fine. It's not a problem. Opinionated charts are fine, but just be aware that it might be happening, and then be a bit more critical about whether the data supports the path they're pushing you down, and then what data isn't being included, and just be more critical. Yeah, be more conscious of the charts you're looking at, I think. Or going by a book called How Charts Lie by Alberto Cairo. I've got it here. This book by Alberto Cairo is a whole book's worth of the answer to that question. It's very, very good.
Amazing, thank you. Next question from Hanel. Is there any attempt to correct the gender biases in historical data?
yes and no. And so, well, so without knowing the full context of the question, historical biases are, if you're looking at historical data, then the biases should be kept, right? You know, it's like this is the data we collected. The methods of data collection reflect social attitudes. You know, just collecting data is a gender political statement. But then we can, you know, apply statistical weightings to try and unbias things, and you know, certainly with contemporary data sets, we can do a lot of statistical work to try and do that. Then there's a whole question about if you're doing data analysis using generative AI, should the generative AIs correct for biases? And I find that a really hard question to answer because, yes, I want a world where biases are not in our data. But the thing is, my political viewpoint is not the same as everybody's political viewpoint. So my bias might be different to somebody else's bias. And currently, the people deciding those bias corrections are mostly US based CEOs. We don't get insight into what decisions they are making to alter biases. And we have to ask if we're okay with that. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Andy. I know there was a request in the chat just about the book recommendations being shared. This recording will be shared with you also. You'll be able to look back and see those book recommendations through that as well. I know there's been a couple of comments letting everyone know what that latest book recommendation was as well. Cool. Coming on to the next question from Michael. What best practices have... Oh, sorry, my screen just went downwards. What best practice have you developed with prompting? Key do's and don'ts?
Longer is better. Yeah, longer is better. Outside of the field of data analysis, whenever I'm asking it to review text, you know, so I ask it to do a lot of text. I write stuff and then get some advice on it. I find a really good prompt is, okay, here's some text. Tell me about it, but I want you to tell me about it twice. I want you to tell me the positive answer, and then I want you to roast me. And it's hilarious because if you give it the permission, it will lay into you. But it's really good because it does. It will point out glaring hideousness in whatever prose you write. So longer prompts because it needs the context of trying to understand what is in your head, and just get it to respond in different ways, right? You know, that's quite a useful way of doing things.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to come to this question next because it relates, I think, to what you've just been saying there. I use ChatGPT and Cursor AI. I'm often worried that the prompt I write might cause me missing out on something or hiding something I'm not aware of. What's your take on
that? Well, yeah, it slightly goes back, right? You know, the coding tools are amazing, but as a user of those tools, you have to question if I publish this into production. You know, if you go into software engineering, if you put it into production, you know, what rigorous, how rigorous are your tests on that software? How can you maintain it in 6 months, right? Because, you know, again, I mean, I used to be a software engineer, right? You know, the pain of coming back to code 6 months later because somebody's found a bug in it, and then you think you can't work it out. You know, it takes a long time to re-familiarize yourself with the code you wrote. And if you didn't write it, then it's even harder. And if you, yeah, so again, it comes back to that attentiveness, right? If you're using code, if you're using AI to write your code, you need to be really pretty good at writing code in order to assess it. And again, that's being as verbose in your prompts as possible is a good way, is at least one way of starting to solve that.
Thank you. Next question from Kelly. How much time do you feel is wasted error checking and reprompting to correct?
Well, an LLM is designed to give you infinite answers, right? The brilliance of an LLM, you can give it one prompt and just get gazillions of answers, right? That's amazing. And yet, ChatGPT, when they first launched OpenAI, no, OpenAI, when they first launched ChatGPT, were like, oh, what should we do? We'll just stick a chat box on it and a single threaded chat interface. I mean, so that's brilliantly familiar to us, but it's a completely narrowing down of the potential of generative AIs. And from a data analysis perspective, it's mindlessly frustrating because you have this long single thread of data analysis, and every time you get one thing corrected, it often makes a mistake that it repeated. And so you're in this long thread, and you're like, well, can we go back to there? Can we go back to here? And it's really hard to do that. Um, and so because you've got to be super diligent with any analysis you're doing, um, and you need to be referring back to things and auto-correcting. I find it very frustrating trying to do exploratory analysis using the LLMs because they make mistakes. You can't. It's very hard to be threaded and do anything that isn't linear. And so often I find I've spent so much time faffing around. I mean, there was a slide I didn't actually show. If anybody's familiar with Add to Playlist, the best show on Radio 4, they play music and analyze it and describe it. I tried to do an analysis of all 500 tracks. Sorry, of all 500 tracks. And I was trying to be like, okay, the release dates aren't always right because of cover versions and things like that. So I was trying to do a data cleaning exercise, and it was an absolute bloody nightmare. I could have just manually Googled every single track to get the release date, and it would have been faster. Um, yeah, I find there's the answer.
Thank you. Question from Harshdeep here. Read an excellent data visualization book called Storytelling with Data, emphasized key points about thinking like a designer, pre-attentive attributes to reduce cognitive overload. There you go. There's the book, everyone. And creating a story arc when presenting a visualization. Do you think AI will ever get to this level such that you can give it some data, have a detailed prompt explaining explicitly what you want, and will give you an effective visual for stakeholder presentation?
This is an absolutely seminal book. You all should get it. Maybe that's a rubbish answer, isn't it? I'm sorry, Luke. That's a terrible answer. My experiment so far is even if I say I want a chart that is optimized for a presentation, it emphasizes this particular mark in one color against the others with this kind of chart type. It doesn't quite work because there's just a lot of things that are going on that we take for granted when we're doing that in Excel or Tableau. Maybe it'll get there. If you try and do the things in this book describes using Gen AI, I think you will find it frustrating.
Thank you. Cool. Another question here is, as a takeaway for us as practitioners, how would you summarize your main advice on how data analysts should integrate AI into their day-to-day work?
That's a great question. With care, I would, in terms of actual production work, I think at the moment, try and use the Gen AI tools as a sort of as a side project, prototyping and trying things out. Right, I think it's like right if you're using the actual LLM tools, right, Claude, ChatGPT, etc. If you're using a tool an AI analytics tool where the AI is part of the analytics process, it should be a bit more accurate. So if you're just using the LLM models, just use them as a kind of an experimentation thing. Where you're trying to do ideas and turn maybe user interviews into stories or mock-ups or wireframes, that's great. It's a really good creative engine. I think you can get that creative engine from talking to other human beings, and that way you all grow as experience. But it is very good at that. And there was some research published just this week that shows the most common usage of ChatGPT and Claude is for idea making, right? So I think with care in production alongside your actual production analytics work, and then ideation stuff, brainstorming is pretty safe.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. And I think that was a very good question to end on as well, because I know we're at time. So yeah, a massive thank you from my side for the time today and delivering this session. I know I saw a lot of thank yous earlier on. It was a brilliant session, so really, really appreciate it. As you will see in the chat as well, for those who are coming to kind of get a taste of what the Career Accelerator is like, you'll see that there is a link to the brochure and a link for a meeting with an enrollment advisor. So please do go ahead and click on those if you're interested. But once again, a massive thank you. The recording will be shared around with everyone, and enjoy the rest of your days, everyone.
Thanks everybody.